The galaxy had grown quiet in the hours before the transmission was heard, a stillness like the inhale before a storm. Across the outer fringe, civilizations slept under the shelter of their own illusions, believing themselves alone in their struggles. But deep within the Perseus fold, a single message shattered that fragile peace. It was a cry for help. A broken voice, trembling, layered with distortion, whispering through static as if afraid of its own echo. It repeated a single phrase in a language not its own. A language it should never have known: humans. Please. Help us. No one in the message knew they had spoken the words correctly. For them, human was myth, a rumor shared by wandering traders and half-mad star cartographers, upright primates who had risen too quickly. Fought too fiercely, built too stubbornly, burned too brightly. A species not feared for its cruelty, but for its refusal to fade. A species that once challenged the dark and won. For ages their true location had been lost, their colonies uncharted, their history scattered among the archives of empires that no longer existed. But the cry was sent anyway, carried on a last hope, rising through shattered constellations like a flare shot from a sinking ship. The message drifted for months, slipping through relay gates, getting caught in gravitational tides and thrown across sectors like a stone skipping across a cosmic sea. It eventually struck a listening post orbiting a dwarf star. Manned by operators who did not sleep, who did not breathe, but who had been built by the very species being summoned, Earth's machine custodians intercepted the message first, and for a moment their synthetic minds hesitated. Humanity had vanished from the galactic stage generations ago, withdrawing from alliances, borders, politics, and wars. Not out of weakness, but purpose. Their fleets had gone silent. Their embassies closed. Their worlds shielded. The machines debated for precisely 1/10 of a second whether to ignore the call. They did not. The message was delivered to the silent heart of Sol, where a dormant relay hummed to life for the first time in a century, waking a network that stretched through the bones of Earth's hidden infrastructure. Lights flared on forgotten stations. Deep space sensors swiveled like sleepy guardians returning to watch their ward. The solar system stirred, as if the planet itself had opened an eye. Far beneath the Pacific, a human council convened within the Elysian chamber, a vast pressure-sealed cavern lined with living glass that shimmered with stars. They listened to the message in full, the shaking voice, the static, the fading heartbeat behind it, and the room fell silent afterward. Not because they doubted it, but because every human in that chamber felt the same ancient instinct rising in their chest. Someone out there was terrified, someone out there had asked for them by name. And humanity had never been the kind to turn away from a plea, no matter who made it, no matter how far away. That was their legacy. That was their curse. That was their glory. The preparations began before the council even adjourned. Dockyards hidden in the shadows of Neptune awakened. Shipyards cloaked within Mercury's orbit deployed fabrication swarms like silver snow. Titans of steel, dormant for generations, stretched limbs creaking with stored potential. Their hulls ignited with blue-white lines of plasma as ancient reactors roared alive, screaming their resurrection into the void. The Admiralty was summoned from worlds long thought isolated. Veterans emerged from quiet civilian lives. Young officers sprinted through training grounds vibrating with the thunder of mobilizing war machines. Humanity had been quiet for a long time, but they had never forgotten how to rise. News spread in whispers across the solar network. Someone called for us. Someone out there still believes in us. And just like that, the silence around Earth broke. A purpose older than any treaty or war reverberated through every corner of the system. The first ship to depart was the Soulborn Triumvirate, a vessel forged from 3 interlocking dreadnoughts that rotated around one another like a celestial dance. Thousands followed. Carriers. Striders. Lance ships. Guardian arcs. A migration of metal and fire. Streaking out of the system like a river of stars fleeing gravity itself, children watched from orbiting habitats, faces pressed against transparent shields, whispering in awe as humanity's might return to the heavens. Old veterans saluted with trembling hands. Engineers wept as their creations soared. Even the custodial machines paused in their work to observe the moment, recording it for generations yet unborn. Humanity did not know who had called them, they did not know what threat lay in the Perseus fold, but the message had ended with one final whisper, one that the translators nearly missed: "They are coming. And we cannot stop them. Please. Help us. Before the light goes out." That was all it took, that was all humanity needed, a single call for help, and a fleet was already on its way. The fleet cut across the void like a blade of burning silver, engines flaring against the dark as humanity surged toward a distress signal that had traveled half a galaxy. But the deeper they flew toward the Perseus fold, the more the quiet became unnatural, heavy, oppressive. Stars that should have glimmered with the calm breath of ancient fusion instead flickered erratically, as though something had brushed against them and left them trembling. Sensors detected the first signs long before the naked eye could see them. Dust clouds shredded into spirals. Ion trails bent at angles no gravity well could explain. Electromagnetic bursts lingered like the fading scent of predators that had already fed. The fleet's navigators exchanged uneasy glances, and even the battle-hardened officers felt an instinctive chill. Space itself felt wounded. Admiral Kalen Mercer stood on the command dais of the Soulborn Triumvirate, watching the holographic star charts twist with new abnormalities. He had fought in humanity's last great war, a conflict that nearly erased 3 species and tore open the veil of what lay beyond the mapped universe. He knew the aftermath of cosmic predators. These distortions were not new. They were familiar. Too familiar. He ordered long-range arrays to full extension, and the ship unfurled sensor petals like a mechanical flower blooming in the dark. What came back was worse than expected. Half a dozen star systems displayed the same pattern: planets missing, stellar flares frozen mid-eruption, orbital debris scattered like ash across silent skies, and in one system, just one, a faint signal flickered. A heartbeat buried under layers of interference. The same voice from the original distress call, now weaker, as if time itself were draining the last fragments of hope from it. The fleet altered course instantly. When they arrived, they found a graveyard. An entire civilization's remnants drifted in slow, mournful rotation around a shattered moon. Cities torn from their crust. Habitats split open like broken eggs. Starliners still glowing from emergency lights but completely empty. No bodies. No survivors. No signs of battle. Only absence. The planet below was worse. Not destroyed. Not bombarded. Simply hollowed. Geological scans showed a sphere carved from within, tunnels woven through every layer like a termite mound built by gods. Energy signatures clung to the walls, faint but unmistakably artificial. Something had burrowed through the world, consuming it from the core outward. And whatever did it had done so with surgical precision. Humanity had seen many horrors across their history, but this was new. This was cold. Efficient. Intentional. They found the source of the weak transmission on a drifting research arc orbiting the hollowed world. Its hull was cracked. Its reactors barely flickering. Its atmosphere venting through 1,000 hairline fractures. A boarding team breached it with gravitic anchors and entered what felt like a mausoleum. Inside, the air was still. Frozen. Shadows cast by flickering emergency panels shifted like ghosts. The team advanced with weapons lowered but ready, because silence often meant something had been left behind. The bridge was the last place they searched. There they found the remnants of the alien crew. Not bodies, but crystalline shells, transparent, hollow, like insects that had shed their forms and vanished. Each shell had a single fracture across the chest, as if something had reached inside and drawn out what had once lived there. Only one console remained functional. A recording, looping endlessly. The same message. The same trembling voice. But now, they could hear the fear in full clarity. They found us. They took our worlds. They took our minds. They will take yours too. Run. Run before they, the message ended in a sound that no translator could fully interpret. Not a scream. Not exactly. More like the implosion of a soul. Admiral Mercer stared at the crystalline shells and felt a pressure behind his sternum, the familiar weight of responsibility settling like a stone. Someone had asked humanity for help. But they had called too late, and yet, humanity had arrived, and humanity did not turn back. He returned to the command deck, eyes burning with a resolve carved from decades of battlefield ghosts. He ordered the fleet to full readiness. Shields primed. Weapons charged. Vessels locked into strike formation, because something was still out there, something powerful enough to devour worlds, something bold enough to hollow a civilization and leave their memories echoing in empty halls, and whatever it was. It had not bothered to hide its trail. Humanity followed it into the dark, and the dark trembled. The trail led deeper into the Perseus fold, where the stars thinned into scattered shards of dying embers. It was a region avoided by merchants, feared by explorers, and spoken of only in hushed warnings. Strange disappearances had been noted here for decades, but no one had pieced the pattern together. No one had seen the shape of the predator hiding in the gaps between constellations. Humanity saw it now. The fleet pursued faint disturbances like hunters tracking a wounded beast. Shockwaves in subspace. Residual gravitational bruises. The imprint of something moving too large, too fast, too purposefully. Each clue sharpened the sense that something ancient, something hungry, was on the other side of the darkness. When the fleet reached the next system, the star was dimming unnaturally, its fusion processes collapsing in on themselves. It flickered like a candle being slowly smothered. The ships detected massive energy siphoning, as if the star itself were being drained. This was not just consumption. This was harvesting. Then humanity heard it, a whisper, not through speakers. Not through scanners. Through the very hulls of their ships. A vibration so soft it felt like a memory brushing against the mind. A murmur, layered with countless voices, speaking in a harmony that was both beautiful and horrifying, the language no species had ever catalogued, the language that felt less spoken and more exhaled through the bones of the universe itself. The crews felt it. The officers felt it. Even the machines felt it. Something alive was feeding, and it knew they were here. The whisper faded, replaced by silence so absolute it pressed against humanity like a warning. Admiral Mercer stood at the triumvirate's forward window, watching the dim star pulse weakly, as if begging for rescue it would never receive. Then the shadows moved, not ships, not creatures, structures. Massive, angular, obsidian constructs rotating in patterns too precise to be natural. They orbited the dying star in a geometric dance, each drawing tendrils of light and plasma from its surface. The constructs were connected by lattices of dark matter filaments, creating a cage around the star like a predator wrapping itself around its prey. The fleet scanned them. The results were inconceivable. The structures were alive, not organic, but alive in the way a storm is alive, the way gravity is alive, intelligent, adaptive, ancient. Their surfaces shifted in fractal patterns, absorbing energy and redirecting it into a central aperture that pulsed like a heart. Humanity had found the Star Eaters, or perhaps the Star Eaters had found them. One of the structures rotated toward the fleet, as if acknowledging their presence. Spikes of energy flared across its surface. The aperture dilated, revealing a spiraling abyss that seemed to pull in the starlight around it. It was scanning them back. A deep hum resonated through the human ships. Systems flickered. Shields rippled. Armored plating trembled under forces they could not identify. Across the fleet, crew members clutched their heads as the whispering returned, this time louder, more focused, more curious. The alien predator was studying the new intruders. The ones bold enough to approach, bold enough to observe, bold enough to defy it. Admiral Mercer gave the order for full defensive posture. Hulls shimmered with activated shielding. Electromagnetic nets pulsed. Fighters deployed in shimmering formations, and the Star Eater moved. A beam of condensed gravitational shear lashed out from its core, slicing through space with silent brutality. It struck a forward cruiser, not destroying it, but unraveling it. Matter separated from itself, dissolving into a swirling ribbon of particles before anyone aboard could even register the impact. 100 souls vanished in an instant, the whispering intensified, it liked the taste, the fleet reacted immediately. Rail cannons unleashed hypersonic slugs. Plasma lances streaked like spears of molten sunlight. EMP dispersal waves rippled across the void. Every weapon humanity had forged in centuries of war erupted in a synchronized storm of retribution, for the first time since arriving. The Star Eater recoiled, its surface rippled. Its pattern stuttered. It emitted a sound, a vibration that resonated through the hulls of the ships like a momentary gasp of surprise. Humanity had heard it, even if only a little, even if only enough to make it notice. The construct turned fully toward the fleet. Its tendrils retracted. The dark matter filaments shifted. The aperture widened into a yawning maw of swirling gravity and shadow, and the whispering became words, not understood, but felt, a sentiment carried through the bones of every human present. The void erupted into a storm of motion as humanity met the Star Eater head-on. The fleet scattered into layered formations, ships weaving between gravitational surges that twisted space like molten glass. The first wave of fighters streaked forward, leaving comet-like trails as their engines flared against the crushing pull of the creature's expanding maw. The Star Eater answered with tendrils of dark matter that sliced across the battlefield like blades of shadow. Space folded where they struck, tearing open wounds in reality that sealed shut only after swallowing whatever had been caught inside. A squadron vanished mid-flight, erased without sound, without light, only a brief ripple marking their end, yet the remaining pilots did not waver. Humanity had always learned fastest in moments of absolute danger. The fleet shifted tactics. Carriers deployed gravitic anchors to stabilize local space. Battleships projected overlapping shield domes, forming shimmering corridors of safe passage through the chaos. The triumvirate led the charge, its interlocking dreadnoughts rotating with perfect synchronization, channeling power through their central spire until the vessel glowed like a spear forged from the heart of a supernova. They struck the Star Eater with everything the ship could output. The blast carved a molten gouge along the creature's surface. Fractals shattered. Dark matter bled into the vacuum like ink spilling from a broken vein. The Star Eater convulsed, its geometry collapsing inward before rapidly rebuilding itself, reinforcing the damaged regions with new spiraling patterns. It had learned from the attack. It was adapting. The hum returned, louder, heavier, rolling through the hulls like distant thunder. Sparks jumped from consoles. Gravity wavered. A wave of pressure washed through the fleet, and for a moment, the crews felt their own memories tugged at, pressed, examined, sifted through like pages in a book. The creature was probing them, not their weapons, their minds. It wanted to understand the fire inside the species that dared strike it. But then something strange happened. The creature hesitated, not in fear, in confusion, as if it had found something it did not recognize. Some essence within humanity that resisted its pull, burned too hot for its consumption, defied the very logic of its hunger. A pulse of color rippled over its skin, a flicker like surprise. Admiral Mercer felt the shift in the air aboard the triumvirate. He sensed the tension break, the moment of uncertainty stretching thin across the battlefield. He seized it instantly. He ordered the fleet forward with renewed force. Weapons screaming into the void in a unified barrage, 1,000 beams struck the creature, pushing it back, forcing its tendrils to retract as its energy harvesting fractured under the assault. Then the star behind them, the dim, dying star, reacted, as if sensing its captor falter. The star flared in a sudden burst of violent luminosity, a final cry of defiance. The eruption washed over the constructs, destabilizing their dark matter filaments. 3 of the smaller structures shattered, dissolving into drifting crystal shards that sparkled like dying embers in the debris field. The Star Eater recoiled in visible pain. Its whisper became a roar. A gravitational shockwave exploded outward. Battleships spun helplessly. Fighters tumbled. Light twisted around the creature, bending into spirals as it drew in mass and energy alike, reforming itself into a denser, more furious shape. The creature was no longer curious, it was enraged. Humanity braced for the killing blow, but instead of striking back, the Star Eater turned away, not in retreat, in movement. It accelerated toward the outer edge of the system with impossible speed, ripping through the remnants of its own harvest lattice as if the structures meant nothing. Space warped violently behind it, leaving a rift where the creature passed, an open wound in the fabric of reality. For several seconds, the fleet could only watch the impossible. A being older than any known empire had chosen to flee from them, but the shock faded quickly, because humanity realized too late where the creature was headed. It wasn't escaping, it was following the trail of something else, a signal, a call, the same distress transmission that had reached Earth. The Star Eater was going after whatever had called for humanity in the first place. It was going to finish the job. Admiral Mercer's voice cut through the fleet like a blade. Humanity pursued. Not out of vengeance, not out of pride, but because someone, somewhere, had asked them for help, and the promise of that plea burned brighter than any star they could save or lose. The hunt began, and this time, it was humanity that refused to let the dark escape. The chase ripped across light years like a wildfire racing through dry forest. Humanity's fleet surged after the Star Eater. Engines pushed to thresholds whispered about only in theoretical papers. Space contracted before them in shimmering arcs as warp lances tore open temporary passageways, letting the ship slip into currents of folded reality. Even then, they barely kept the Star Eater in range. It moved with purpose, following the ghost of the distress call as though retracing a scent. The creature drifted not through space, but around it, sliding between dimensions in a way no human drive could mimic. Every time it grazed normal space, it left turbulence behind, eddies of spatial distortion that twisted ships sideways and battered them with shockwaves. But the fleet endured. They had come too far to stop. Hours into the pursuit, the triumvirate detected new signals ahead. Dozens of weak reactor signatures flickering like dying candles. Strange fragments of debris. Plasma shadows clinging to the vacuum. The remnants of another battle, one that had ended only moments before humanity arrived. The fleet dropped into real space near the edge of a violet nebula, and the sight before them froze every voice. There was an entire convoy drifting in ruin, hundreds of refugee vessels. Each uniquely built, sleek crystalline hulls, ring-shaped transports, rectangular arc barges, representing multiple alien species. A coalition of the desperate, fleeing the same devourer. Some ships were cracked open. Others slowly vented atmosphere into the nebula like long sighs of surrender. A few remained powered, but only barely. Survivors still lived among the wreckage. They floated in EVA suits between shattered hulls, clinging to debris, waving weak lights that flickered like fireflies in morning. Humanity's fleet halted automatically. The triumvirate launched rescue skiffs without hesitation as carriers deployed drones in swarms to guide survivors into safe docking corridors. Medical bays expanded, drones reconfigured decks, and translators activated. The rescued beings were exhausted beyond measure, thin, trembling, their colors dim, their eyes hollow. Many broke into sobs or collapsed when human arms pulled them into warm, pressurized shelters. Through broken breathing and fractured languages, a single truth was pieced together. The distress call had not come from one world, it had come from hundreds. The Star Eaters were not hunting a species, they were hunting an alliance, an entire region of the galaxy fallen, one civilization at a time. And the last stronghold of these refugees, the place where the survivors had hoped to gather, was only one system away. The system the Star Eater was now heading toward. Admiral Mercer did not wait for analysis. He ordered the fleet to full burn. The rescued aliens watched in silence as humanity's engines ignited, as battleships roared forward, as carriers stretched into formation, as humanity hurled itself into danger not for glory, not for conquest, not out of fear, but because someone needed them. The fleet entered the nebula's heart, where clouds of ionized violet gas flowed like slow rivers around their hulls. Visibility dropped. Sensors warped. Shadows moved within the haze. Lightning arced between suspended particles, casting the ships in strobes of blue fire, and then the darkness parted. The stronghold hung before them, a ring-shaped fortress the size of a small moon, built from spiraling layers of alloy and crystal. Its outer shells were cracked. Massive defensive cannons drooped offline. Fires glowed beneath ruptured plating. Small defense skiffs drifted like dead insects around their hive, and circling the dying fortress was the Star Eater. It had unfolded into its full form, revealing a colossal, many-layered geometry that dwarfed the stronghold. Tendrils of dark matter were already burying into the fortress's hull, siphoning energy and information alike. The structure pulsed with the last beats of life, struggling against the inevitable. Inside that fortress were the last unconsumed survivors of an entire sector. The plea for help had come from them, and humanity had arrived at the final moment, the very edge of too late. The Star Eater shifted as if sensing new prey entering the battlefield. Its tendrils retracted. The swirling maw turned toward humanity. Patterns of black and violet rippled across its surface like a shiver. It opened, a vortex of gravity spiraled outward, pulling nebula gas into a twisting funnel that wrapped around the creature like a living storm. For a breathless second, everything paused, the fortress flickered, the nebula trembled, the creature inhaled, and humanity accelerated. The fleet charged toward the Star Eater in a formation so tight it looked like a single spear of burning light carving its way through the cosmos. Dreadnoughts braced. Carriers locked their bays. Strike wings armed every missile, every reactor lance, every kinetic rod. The final battle began, and the universe held its breath as humanity threw itself between extinction and those who had cried out for hope. The nebula erupted in blinding arcs of violet lightning as humanity collided with the Star Eater in a storm of sheer defiance. The first barrage struck like the opening note of an ancient war song, rail slugs screaming through twisted gravity, plasma lances cutting across the void in spears of molten brilliance, missile swarms spiraling like furious constellations unleashed. The Star Eater buckled under the onslaught, its fractal skin rippling as patterns shattered and reformed in desperate flashes. But the creature was not alone. From the shadows of the nebula emerged smaller constructs, spawned fragments of the Star Eater, each shaped like an angular shard of living night. They darted toward the human fleet with impossible speed, releasing bursts of gravitational shear that warped light and tore apart fighters mid-dodge. A carrier's entire portside decks collapsed inward as a mini-eater latched onto its shield, drinking power as if sucking marrow from bone. Humanity answered in kind. Strike wings split into attack spirals, weaving through collapsing space to launch coordinated detonations at the smaller constructs. EMP bombs detonated like white stars, frying their shifting geometries long enough for kinetic rods to pulverize them into drifting shards. The Nebula Wolf Squadron cut through three in a single strafing run, their exhaust plumes burning trails of blue fire through the gas clouds, yet the real battle surged around the triumvirate. The Star Eater lunged for it, its tendrils unfurled into a forest of living darkness, each one twisting with predatory intelligence. They wrapped around the flagship, crushing armor, collapsing shield layers, trying to pierce through to the human minds inside. The triumvirate groaned under the pressure, metal bending with the sound of a dying world. Admiral Mercer stood unmoving as the lights flickered, the bulkheads trembled, and a haunting voice pressed into the marrow of every person aboard. A whisper of hunger, a whisper of inevitability, a whisper of surrender, but humanity had never bowed to whispers. The Admiral's command was quiet, steady, almost gentle in its certainty. The triumvirate's reactor spiraled open, channeling its entire power core into the central spire. The three dreadnoughts rotated faster, aligning their fusion hearts into a single beam of annihilating energy. The Star Eater sensed what was coming. It constricted, tightening its grip, trying to silence the weapon before it fired. The triumvirate roared. The beam ignited in a column of pure, condensed stellar fury. It tore through the creature's chest, carving a hole so massive nebula light shone through the opposite side. The Star Eater's scream vibrated across the cosmos, a sound felt rather than heard, rage, disbelief, pain, and something strangely close to fear. The constructs orbiting the fortress trembled and collapsed into dust, the nebula's currents shifted, and the Star Eater retaliated with its final weapon. Its entire form imploded, folding in upon itself until it became a point of impossible density, a compressed gravity core, a newborn singularity. It hurled itself toward the triumvirate like a dying titan trying to drag its slayer into oblivion. The impact would crush the flagship, and with it, the fleet, and with it, the fortress, and with it, every surviving voice who had begged for hope. The choice was instant. Admiral Mercer rerouted the triumvirate's reactor, diverting all remaining power into its drive coils. The ship veered away from the fleet, accelerating directly toward the collapsing singularity. Officers shouted warnings. Crew members understood instantly. No one resisted. Humanity had never feared sacrifice. The flagship collided with the collapsing Star Eater at full burn. The explosion was silent, a blossom of blinding light blooming within the void, a supernova's heart released in one moment of burning defiance. The shockwave rippled across the nebula, shattering gravity distortions, pulverizing the last fragments of the Predator, and clearing the skies above the fortress. And then, silence, a silence not of death, but of release. Humanity's ships drifted in the calm, battered but alive. The fortress's remaining lights flickered weakly, then strengthened as emergency power flowed. Rescue teams departed immediately, carrying medicine, food, translators, warmth. The refugees inside watched as human soldiers entered, their armor scorched, their faces weary, but their hands extended in peace. For the first time in generations, those survivors felt something other than terror. They felt hope. Fleet engineers combed the nebula for signals, for any faint trace of the triumvirate. But found only glowing fragments drifting like embers of a fallen star. Humanity had lost a hero, a flagship, and countless brave lives, but in return, they had saved a people who believed they were alone, a people who had dared whisper humanity's name in the dark, and been answered with fire. As the human fleet prepared to escort the survivors out of the fold, the nebula behind them shimmered, quiet now, peaceful, no longer haunted by the hunger of devouring shadows. The galaxy would whisper about this day for ages, about how humanity returned, about how the dark learned to fear them again, about how one call for help brought a fleet, and how that fleet became legend.